So, Amish, let's get started with the conversation. To begin with, guys, I wanted to show you, Amish, the cover of War of Lanka is already on, there, so you can see it. But at the same
my
time,
t-shirt on this book.
Excellent, exactly.
No such thing as too much marketing.
Yes, of course, and also in that on that note, I've got three. I know it's flipped right now, but you can see Ram, Sita, and Raavan here, which were the three books that came before War of Lanka and made readers that much more excited about the war after the three books. So, Amish, the first question to you, and it's a question that I've also thought about a lot, is because Ramayana itself is such a, the idea of kind of taking on the story of Lord Ram, the story of, Sita, of Raavan, of War of Lanka, it's been told in so many ways, in so many forms, since the time immemorial. It's not just fiction. There's been oral history, there's been retellings, all of those things. So when you decided to tackle this sort of, this big canvas, how did that happen? What was the spark? And was it always something that you had? I know you wrote Meluha before. Was it always something that was coming next? Or was there some inspiration or some spark behind it?
So look, yes, once the Shiva Trilogy was complete with the Oath of the Vayuputras, from 2013, I didn't really know which series I would take up. So I had various ideas in my mind. At that time, I had ideas for some 10, 11 series. I had left clues for them in the Shiva Trilogy. Now I have some, maybe 25, 30 series, not books, series in my mind. So I wasn't sure which series I would take up. And then what happened was I had actually written an article, I think late 2013, early 2014, that I was at a literature festival. And I met someone who spoke very rudely about Lord Ram. There's nothing wrong with questioning in the Indian way. We don't have a concept of blasphemy. Our traditional religions are deeply liberal, unlike some other religions. You don't have a concept of blasphemy. You can question. But we also believe that shabdon ki maryada honi chahiye. There's a certain way that if we want to question, a certain manners that we must have in questioning. And I found those manners missing when someone was speaking about Lord Ram. That disturbed me. And I guess maybe that incident was supposed to happen to me to encourage me, because I was so upset that the next day I started writing the Ram Chandra series. And in fact, I wrote this in an article. I think it was in Hindustan Times. Where I wrote explaining my views on Lord Ram.
Right. No, I completely understand. Also because the way you've also, you talked about the idea of questioning and of exploring. It doesn't have to be done, like you said, in an abrasive way, but there is the idea of questioning. And I feel like even in your series, for example, the figure of Raavan, and the way you've handled Sita and the way you've handled the myth, all of those come from a place of trying to understand what happened with the lens of today also. So there's a bit of both, right? There is the myth and the mythology that we are aware of, the stories that we are aware of. And then what you've done, I think you've brought the ideas of today, the ideas of the understanding of reading those epics now with the lens of today. I think you brought that on very well. And it gives you a complete picture of these characters. So in the sense that the figures in the story are complete people. So Raavan, for example, I think is a wonderful character that you've created. There is no black and white there. You've kind of looked at every aspect of him. So I want to know a little bit about writing mythology in that way, in the way that you take on something that has some set, ideas, the set stories out there, and then you take it and you kind of try to tell it in your own way. What are the considerations that come with it? What are the delicacies that, like how do you walk the line between staying true to the story and also staying true to your writing as a craft and as an author?
Look, the concept of looking at our core stories of the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Puranas and interpreting them. This has been around for thousands of years, all the way from Kalidasa's time, and even the greatest Sanskrit playwright ever, Bhasa's onwards to various different regional languages. I think, I'd heard this wonderful line that all storytellers in India are obsessed with essentially three groups of stories: the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the Puranas, and all our stories are some or the other interpretation of these three groups. There are of course Panchatantras, etc., but broadly these three groups, and they kind of inform the way we look at stories, all of us storytellers. Perhaps that's also because most Indians never get tired of listening to these stories. We love the stories of our gods and goddesses, but you'll notice across history that every generation keeps the soul of the old but wants to hear a slightly different interpretation, which brings in the issues of the modern day. Yeah. Like I said, you find that in the plays of Asa, which were written 2,000, 2,500 years ago, the plays of Kalidasa, in the various regional language, versions that emerged over the last millennium, and you find them now as well. So I perhaps am just following a very, very rich ancient tradition. I don't think I'm doing anything new. I'm not doing anything new. I'm only following a very ancient Indian tradition that we had. And in terms of when you're talking about walking that fine line, I think look, essentially, the story is guided by the blessing. I don't believe I've said this very often. I don't think I create the stories. I almost receive the stories. But the lens that you look at defines the way the stories come. I look at these stories in a respectful manner because I'm actually a devotee. I actually worship the gods and goddesses I write on. I wear an Om Namah Shivaya Kada, I wear a Rudraksh Mala. I'm actually a very proud follower of Dharma, a very proud Hindu. And since I think of these subjects with respect, I guess, that natural balance comes in my mind that I write of them, these stories respectfully, but also in a new way to bring in modern issues into it.
I mean, I get that completely because I think you're right. It does come through the respect that each of, and not just the primary characters, but the respect that the entire story in itself has gotten through the book. And I want to know because if we move on to War of Lanka now, which is it's really it really brings together trajectories. Everything, all the threads that you've kind of brought together in the first three books converge in this one. And I feel like just the canvas, the scope, the scale of the story is so huge. It's so, I remember starting to edit this. One of the things that I had to do was read the first three, one after the other quickly so that I would, everything would be kind of new and refreshed in my mind when I started editing. And because of that, all of these things were very clear. The idea that, and I'm sure readers will find that too, things they've read about in Ram, in the first book, suddenly kind of coming here to conclusion, or the same thing for Sita, or the same thing for Raavan. I want to know how it was plotting War of Lanka, what it required from you, what kind of revisiting of your previous stories did it require for you, or was it already a canvas you had set for yourself and you were just, that's how you had begun the plotting and then you did it book by book as you started writing the book? What was the plotting like?
I wish I could give one of those answers that I have this brilliant strategic mind and I plot the story and it's all, nicely in Excel files with flow charts and all, and somehow I put it all together. But that would be a lie. I know it would make me look very cool, but that would be a lie. The reality is, honestly, I discover the story. As much as you would discover it as a reader, I discover it as a writer. So it's not just that War of Lanka brings together strands from the first three books, that Ram, Scion of Ikshvaku, Sita, Warrior of Mithila, and Raavan, Enemy of Aryavarta. Those three strands and the clues that have been left out there come together in War of Lanka. It's not just that. The entire Ram Chandra series connects clues that were left in the Shiva Trilogy. Yes. Because one of the ways to see the Ram Chandra series is that it's a 1500-year prequel to the events of the Shiva Trilogy. Yes. So stuff that was written in Oath of the Vayuputras or Immortals of Meluha have been connected in this book. There's no way anyone can believe I could have planned all that or plotted all that. How could I? I mean, I'm not a genius. It is the genuine truth. I know it might sound weird. It is the genuine truth. I open the laptop and there's this parallel universe and I record what I see, which is why I keep saying I genuinely believe it's the blessings of Lord Shiva, these stories. I don't understand how all of them kind of tie up. It's when I'm writing the stories, I just know it has to be this way. And you edited me, I can be extremely stubborn on something I will listen, but I am just sure, and at times I cannot explain why it has to be this way. I am just sure it has to be this way, and somehow it just ties up. So I don't plan it. I know it sounds strange. I don't plan it. I discover it. It's the blessings of Lord Shiva.
You mentioned the editing part, and I think one of the things that I found interesting was, of course, I mean, like you said, you've got certain ways in which the story has to go, which I think there was little for me to argue with because the story moved so well. But I remember one of the things that I thought interesting was, while the core of the story, the way it's being told, what's being told is important. The other thing that I think is very important to you is how it's told. In terms of the language, in terms of the style, in terms of the conversation, all of this is so important to you. I mean, I want you to share with the readers, because I know we've had this conversation before already, about the way you've told the story, the language that you use, the style that you use.
For most writers who are immersed in the Indian way, I'm not talking of those who follow Western storytelling techniques, the 3-act structure or things like that, or the Persian storytelling techniques. That's a different thing. I'm talking about those who are immersed in the Indian way.
Right.
The gods that we look up to as writers are essentially Valmiki ji and Ved Vyas ji. And you'll notice that when you read the Valmiki Ramayana, I'm not talking about the Ram Chandra Series or the other, I'm talking about the original Valmiki Ramayana, and of course the critical edition of the Mahabharata. You will find that Valmiki ji lays a lot of stress on the turn of phrase, the beauty of the metaphors, the similes that he draws, and practically every Indian writer who follows that kind of storytelling technique sees Valmiki ji as the role model to follow. So, for example, if you see Kalidas, and you can see these connections if you read Valmiki Ramayana first and then read these other texts.
Yeah.
So, if you read Kalidasa's Meghadutam, for example, you will find that the way he described, and I'm sure everyone has heard of the Meghadutam play, the way he describes the cloud messenger, is almost exactly similar to how Valmiki ji described Lord Ram looking at the cloud because he was waiting for the Varsha season, for the monsoon season to get over. So you think about it, Kalidasa's, among the greatest Sanskrit playwrights ever, his turn of phrase was inspired by Valmiki ji. So that was, one stream of thought in the Indian way. Right. The other stream of thought is actually Ved Vyas ji's Mahabharata. If you read the critical edition of the Mahabharata, you'll find that Ved Vyas ji, in his technique, is very efficient. Right? His entire thing was to convey the story and the philosophies in as clear a manner as possible. He did not spend too much time on metaphors, too much time on similes. So, if you have to draw kind of, the example, Valmiki ji's was like a stroll through a park, or through a jungle. You're just discovering the beauty of nature. You'll get to your destination sometime, but you're discovering, the beauty of the stroll as well. Whereas Ved Vyas ji is very efficient. This is the path, walk ahead, because I want you to get to that destination where you think about certain philosophies. You'll find that there are writers who follow Ved Vyas ji's approach as well. I love Valmiki ji's approach, but I'm a follower of Ved Vyas ji's approach. That essentially make the language efficient. It's more about the philosophies and the stories. Language is only a means to an end. Get the philosophies and the thoughts across. Yeah. And I guess maybe that is why I like to write my books the way I write them.
You write them. Exactly. I get I know what you mean, because there's also so much to tackle in War of Lanka, right? I mean, one of the things that I think was the most impressive when I was reading it was also the way the battle scenes have been done, the way everything, each movement has been done, each strike even has been done. Like you paint a picture in the way that you can really see the war, because most of the book is the war. I mean, it's really the action that's driving the book. Almost chapter by chapter, there's a new action. So that hasn't happened in the first 3 books, in the sense that in the first 3 books, you're almost like sort of setting the 3 different contexts. And then there was War of Lanka.
Yeah, because War of Lanka, half the book is the war. Right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's the preparation for the war. It's the action sequences, the violence. But there's a logic, and you as a reader need to understand why a strategy is being done the way it is being done.
Yeah.
Then you get a deeper sense of why the war happened the way it happened.
Right, and the you talked about the all the greats that have come before that have interpreted the code text, like you said. Were there inspirations in terms of during the research, during what were there specific inspirations that you can think of now? What when you had to pick? What I basically mean is there's so many interpretations, right? There's so many core, there's so many ways of telling that story. How did you find the story that you wanted to tell? What was
there's things which just remain with you, right? Like for example, I had read, or I'd been told the Anand Ramayana, which is also credited to Valmiki a long time back. And the Anand Ramayana actually begins with a war at the sea between Ravan and Lord Dashrath. Now, this is not there in any of the other versions of the Ramayana, and that remained in my mind. And then that came out in Ram, Scion of Ikshvaku. Then Ram Setu, I wanted to know what could be the rational, scientific way in which that the bridge could have been built. And I had, of course, studied on the types of rocks at Rameshwaram. I had studied the ocean movements between Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean, and how that impacted the area where Ram Setu is, because those two seas, the ocean and the sea, meet there. I'd learned some techniques of how foundations were built of wood, and stone structures. And this was a traditional Indian temple building technique, which has been used to build the Taj Mahal as well. That the actual deep foundations are made of wood, which counterintuitively become stronger when they're moist, and which can support even a stone structure. So many of these things then just go into the book. I keep researching, and then what goes into the book is actually Lord Shiva's decision. That's not my decision. My job is to just research as much as I can.
I must say, I think I don't want to give too much away, because the books, I mean, I can imagine everyone just getting their copy and just beginning to read right now, and just would not appreciate too many details from the book. But the Ram Setu, for example, like you mentioned, is, I think, a very good example of reading what is mythology and what is maybe core text that you already know, and finding something so new that you've never seen mentioned in. So what you say about Ram Setu, of kind of making it into something that's that suddenly makes sense to you, and you understand it, not just exactly. And there's more. I mean, there's not just. I mean, Ram Setu is a big example, and it was, I think, one of the times where I was also very taken aback by the explanation and realized, wow, that does make sense, and it does suddenly explain things which have so far been explained in a different way to us. That it just happened, but this gives you the idea of why and how rationally it could have happened. There's so many of those instances in the book. The other thing that I think is interesting is, and I mean, the characters that you've created, what Ram is, what Bharat is, what Shatrughan is. Everyone has their own sort of character that you've stayed with from book 1 to book 4 now. I want to know the creation of these characters, because they are such big. The names are itself, I mean, they're gods for us. So now to kind of write about them in this sort of rounded character way, show them the flaws, show the good, the bad, everything, the gray area that every character has. How was that? How was the creation of characters?
Look, I guess the answer was there in one of my earlier answers, that I genuinely don't believe I'm creating these characters.
It's coming to you.
I actually enter a parallel universe and I record what I see. So for me, they're actually real characters. They're real people, and in many ways more real than the world we live in. Because I can't hear your thoughts. I can't feel your emotions. I can only hear the words that you're speaking. I can only see, your visage, but I cannot hear your thoughts. I cannot feel your emotions. So in some way, and I can do that in that parallel universe. So in some ways, that parallel universe, those characters are actually more real than the world that we live in right now. And I genuinely mean it. I describe what I see. I actually discover them. I don't create them.
I get that also because I feel like what you're saying about it coming to you, I think that's the organic part of the book. The story just flows from one to the other, and I feel like one of the things I do want to tell everyone is, if you're getting back to War of Lanka after a long time, a long break, I really recommend reading the first three books again. I recommend getting them if you haven't already, because that's, I think, one of the things about the four books, and then, like you said about Meluha, is they all become one big story, right? Like, this is one big long story that you're telling, and each book is just a part of it, which comes across, I think, in also the ways that the clues have been dropped. And I know the conversation, I mean, we don't have much time left, but I do want to ask you to talk a little bit about the idea that what you do is essentially breadcrumb clues through the books. Why do you do that? When did that start? And how much of that can readers expect in War of Lanka?
It's been there from the first book. So you have to, from Immortals of Meluha. So you have to read my books with a bit of detailed attention, because there are clues everywhere. There are clues on the covers as well. So these symbols on the sword, the shields, they are not random. I'll give you a clue. Brahmi, it's an ancient script. So these are all clues for what is in the book and what will be there in the sequels as well.
Exactly.
So even the Gurukul names of the four brothers, the Gurukul name of Sita, they are not random, they are clues. But you'll have to connect them to clues in the Shiva Trilogy as well. So I like leaving these clues, and often I don't explain them. So even the section breaks, that are there in the books, these are not random. From Immortals of Meluha, these are, and I'd never explain them. I just like to leave them. And there are the real hardcore readers. There's a group called Amish and The Immortals on Facebook. I love to visit there and just read what what the readers are, the theories they're discussing, what they're decoding from the clues I've left. Sometimes they come out with theories that are even better than what had struck me. And so I leave these clues, but I very rarely do I explain them. Leave it for the readers to decode and figure out. I think in today's day, this assumption that readers want dumbed down content is actually not true. You see the things which are actually, which have cult followings, which have, which people truly love for long periods of time. Those are stories with layers, stories with different levels of understanding. You can understand a story completely just at the surface story level, or you can go deeper and decode many of the clues that are there, or you can go even deeper and understand the philosophies that are being spoken of. Because if you have those things, what you trigger are conversations between readers, and I think that's what truly people enjoy. So I can't say I planned it like that. It just comes to me that way. But I think that's among the things that readers like of my books. And perhaps one of the reasons that I've received so much love from my
Yes, it's how the stories endure. Okay, so we have very little time left. We've got questions, but what I guess we have time for is maybe a question or two. Let's see. The first series, the first question, sorry, is in your first series, the Shiva series. You had mentioned about how Ram's kingdom was the epitome of administration and rule. Did you plan on following up with the story of Ram back then itself?
Yes. So, in fact, there were many story ideas I had in my mind when the Shiva Trilogy had been released. There's one story on the which was my interpretation of the Ramayana, one story, my interpretation of the Mahabharata, one on Lord Parshuram's story, one on Lord Rudra and Lady Mohini's story. There are various stories like this. It just so happened that the one I happened to pick up immediately after the Shiva Trilogy was the Ram Chandra series. So yes, Meluha was essentially Ram Rajya. And what we're discussing in the Ram Chandra series is how was Meluha created. That's one of the ways of looking at the Ram Chandra series, that this was how Meluha was created.
Got it. One more question before we do the closing comments. Were you apprehensive of merging Ram's story with the world of Meluha that you created, given that Ramayana is very popular in your country and everyone knew the story? I'm assuming this question is coming from not India.
Yeah. No, look, I had in the Shiva trilogy, I had already said that Meluha was Ram Rajya. In the first book itself, Immortals of Meluha, it said that Meluha had been founded by Lord Ram, and Meluha's way of life was essentially Ram Rajya. So this was a story that was there in my mind from those days already. And it's been, it's really been fun going back to how Meluha was created through the story of the Ram Chandra series. Because Shiva Trilogy was Meluha, 1500 years after it had been created. And yes, many readers loved what they saw of the life of Meluha. And Ram Chandra series explains well how was that way of life created.
Wonderful. I think this has been a wonderful conversation on a day that you must have had a lot going on. I know that you're embarking on a very full,
a 14 city book tour.
Exactly. So
I should, through the platform of Amazon, I should tell my readers that HarperCollins are slave drivers. They make me work very hard. There's a 14 city book tour.
Your readers have missed you for a long time. I keep seeing comments under, one city's post will say, "Are you coming to so and so city?" And I'm just like, "Oh, thank God he's going to that."
No, I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I mean, it's after 3 years. I'm pulling your leg, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I mean, the last 1 week has been super busy, but I've loved interacting with my readers. And one is doing this after 3 years, right? Because of the pandemic. The previous two books, Suhail Dev and Dharma, were launched online. And of course, it can be done. Yes, book sales happen, but that's not as much fun as actually interacting face to face with readers. And I'm delighted after Raavan to interact once again. There's a wonderful event earlier today at Crossword. And oops, sorry, am I supposed to mention other retailers?
Sorry, no, I think we are. I think what we would like to
it was a massive. It was a great fun event. I've had the opportunity to present the books to very senior people who, luckily for me, are readers of my books. President Murmu, Home Minister Amit Shah, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, various others. I'm having an event in Pune tomorrow with my friend Tehseen Poonawala. It has been a great ride till now, and it promises to be an even greater ride over the next 3 weeks.
Wonderful. I think the one thing to tell readers before we end this conversation is, because, like we said during the conversation, that it's very. And we hope that you go back to these 3 books before you read War of Lanka, if you haven't already. And Amish, do you want to talk about the box set?
Yeah, so I should say that Amazon has a very cool package for the entire Ram Chandra series. And so you can check that out. I'm sure Amazon will be sharing the link along with this video. And Amazon promises to deliver the books within a few days, wherever you are, or within a day, actually. And I have, of course, requested Amazon to offer these books free of cost, but they are going to ask for it. My apologies, but with a good discount. And Amazon, thank you so much for all your love and support. They have always been among my greatest supporters. And thanks, truly appreciate it. And all of you watching this, show some love to Amazon, show some love to me. Check out War of Lanka, check out the entire package indeed of all 4 books. And I hope you like them.
Wonderful. Thank you. That I think ends the live. And thank you so much, Amish, for joining us. And all the best for the tour. It's going to be wonderful. And we hope to see you soon in Delhi.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Team Amazon. Bye, Swati. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone watching. Thank you.